Sony cancelled most of its live service plan, buried Concord, closed studios, reduced Bungie, and ended Destiny 2's continuing development. Hideaki Nishino then looked across that wreckage and said PlayStation still wants more live service games. I'm breaking down how a 12-game money machine became cancelled projects, closed studios, and one expensive excuse named Helldivers 2. Here is the central question: does Sony have a rational business strategy, or is it repeating the same mistake with fewer teams left to sacrifice? Answering that requires returning to the original master plan, before the cancellations became easier to count than the releases. Originally, PlayStation aimed to place 12 live service games on the market by the end of March 2026. Later, Sony reduced that near-term target to 6 after reviewing quality, costs, schedules, and the obvious difficulty of supporting everything. Gaming media now commonly counts 8 projects from that original group as cancelled, stopped, or permanently shut down. Crucially, Sony never announced 8 failures as an official total, so that number must remain a media count. Essentially, management wanted several games selling seasons, cosmetics, passes, subscriptions, and digital currency while players returned every week. Meanwhile, actual players already divided their limited hours among Fortnite, Call of Duty, Destiny, sports games, MMOs, and countless free alternatives. Then Concord arrived and revealed the tiny flaw inside this beautiful financial machine: recurring spending requires recurring customers. Concord launched on August 23, 2024, for PlayStation 5 and personal computers as a $40 team shooter. Within 11 days, Sony stopped sales, offered full refunds, and announced that the servers would close on September 6. Firewalk Studios was later shut down after PlayStation decided the game would not return. Sadly, the only feature nobody could patch into existence was an audience. Predictably, Concord's refund program enjoyed a longer future than its seasonal roadmap. Budget rumors made the disaster sound even larger, especially the repeated claim that development cost $400 million. However, no reliable public financial document confirms that figure, so repeating it as fact would turn criticism into fan fiction. Market conditions were already brutal, because Concord entered a crowded field where players had free team shooters filled with familiar characters. Nothing proves that one issue alone killed the game, but the price, weak recognition, and fierce competition made survival much harder. More importantly, Concord showed that Sony could build a complete service structure without creating a reason for anyone to care. Another warning came from Naughty Dog, which stopped The Last of Us Online before release after examining the support burden. Naughty Dog explained that operating the project would consume studio resources for years and damage future single-player development. Supporting an endless game means producing updates, fixing exploits, balancing weapons, filling calendars, moderating communities, and feeding stores without stopping. Consequently, the studio faced a choice between becoming a permanent support operation and continuing the focused work that built its reputation. Ben Studio also lost an unannounced live service project after Sony reviewed its expanding portfolio. Bluepoint Games suffered an even harsher outcome after its reported God of War Online project was cancelled. Years of work vanished because leadership pushed established teams toward crowded markets where failure becomes clear only after enormous spending. Realistically, the damage extended beyond software because developers lost jobs, careers changed direction, and hard-earned knowledge scattered across the industry. Workers at Bluepoint received the final blow when Sony closed the studio in March 2026 after a business review. Stop and look at that result: respected teams, years of labor, hundreds of disrupted careers, and almost nothing released from the effort. Until this point, Sony could blame weak concepts, inexperienced teams, or individual projects that never found an audience. Bungie removes that excuse because Sony bought the supposed experts, paid billions for their knowledge, and still cut the people who understood the business. Valued at roughly $3.6 billion, the Bungie deal included purchase costs and incentives intended to retain important employees. Officially, Sony expected Bungie to share live game knowledge, technology, community experience, and publishing expertise across PlayStation. Specifically, Bungie was supposed to inspect service projects, offer guidance, and help Sony avoid expensive failures before release. Practically, Bungie also carried serious management failures, rising costs, delayed projects, missed targets, and years of internal overexpansion. Fairness matters because Sony did not invent every problem that weakened Destiny or forced Bungie into repeated restructuring. Nevertheless, PlayStation bought the company knowing that continuing online games require large teams, constant spending, and patience during weaker periods. Buying Bungie was supposed to reduce Sony's risk, yet Bungie became the most expensive example of that risk. Following Destiny 2's final live service update on June 9, 2026, Bungie announced another major workforce reduction. Most of the Destiny team and some Marathon developers were affected, according to Sony's statement and reports from former employees. Washington filings listed at least 292 positions connected to Bungie's local operation, while remote losses may have raised the total. Destiny 2 remains playable, which matters because saying Sony completely closed the game would be inaccurate. Continuing content development and major live service support ended, leaving the existing product available without its previous future. Yet Sony still says it wants globally attractive online games capable of holding communities and producing long-term engagement. Ironically, Destiny already had a recognized name, experienced developers, years of content, established systems and a committed audience. Of course, a famous brand can still become too expensive when updates cost more, audiences shrink, and expansions sell below expectations. That reality explains why Sony might reduce Destiny, but it does not erase the contradiction. Simply, this is the entire problem in plain English. PlayStation bought an established live service operation, reduced its support, and immediately returned to searching for another established live service success. Helldivers 2 explains why management keeps searching, because it became Sony's clear breakout victory from the wider initiative. Arrowhead delivered cooperative action, a lower launch price than many major releases, quick comedy, and a shared galactic war. Communities created stories naturally as players failed missions, argued over planets, celebrated victories, and accidentally destroyed their own teammates. Unlike Concord, Helldivers 2 gave customers an immediate reason to join before asking them to understand a financial ecosystem. Even one Helldivers-sized success can pay for several failed experiments, at least inside an executive spreadsheet. A genuine hit can earn money for years, strengthen PlayStation accounts, support store transactions, and keep players connected across platforms. Unfortunately, Sony may have confused winning once with proof that every studio should keep buying lottery tickets with development teams as payment. Success came because the central game felt good, the identity was clear, and friends generated memorable chaos without corporate instructions. Conceptually, Helldivers began with a simple fantasy, 4 soldiers dropping into chaos together. By contrast, Concord appeared to begin with the service structure and search for excitement afterward. Therefore, Helldivers 2 proves Sony is not wrong about the possible reward. It proves Sony misunderstands what creates that reward. Corporate language hides this distinction by treating live service like a genre, rather than a method of supporting and selling a game. Nishino says these products attract users globally, that Sony wants to revitalize the market, and that continued challenges remain important. Translated into ordinary speech, successful online games produce repeated spending, and PlayStation wants more of that money under its control. Live service is not a game idea, it is what a company does after it already has a game people want to keep playing. Nobody should criticize Sony merely for making multiplayer games because online competition and cooperation remain important parts of modern gaming. Fundamentally, trouble begins when leadership treats recurring revenue as the creative idea instead of the result of a worthwhile experience. Fortnite, Call of Duty, GTA Online, Genshin Impact, and sports games clearly demonstrate why companies chase this model. Massive audiences create digital sales, regular engagement, predictable income, platform activity, and years of valuable customer data. Additionally, Sony earns fees when outside publishers sell content through PlayStation, so wider online spending benefits the entire store. Releasing first-party service games on PlayStation 5 and personal computers also gives matchmaking a larger starting population. Online products need enough active users to fill matches quickly, support different skill levels, justify updates, and maintain social momentum. From Sony's perspective, one enormous success can cover several cancellations, which explains why management keeps accepting the risk. Plainly, Sony is not foolish for wanting multiplayer success or refusing to abandon every service experiment. Rather, Sony looks foolish when it approves oversized projects, burns 6 or 7 years, cancels them, and acts shocked by competition. Gamers do not need 12 permanent hobbies screaming for daily attention, weekly challenges, seasonal resets, and limited cosmetic offers. Ordinary people can barely finish one battle pass while working, sleeping, seeing family, and remembering that dishes exist. Importantly, customer time is the scarce resource, not merely customer money, and every continuing game competes against established routines. Accordingly, Sony should approve fewer projects, run smaller early tests, define audiences clearly, control budgets, and cancel weak concepts sooner. Teams should build these games because their ideas demand continuing communities, not because a spreadsheet demands continuing purchases. Evidence from Helldivers shows that a distinct concept can break through, while Concord shows that expensive polish cannot manufacture desire. Marvel TCon. Fighting Souls should also avoid premature funeral speeches before players can judge the finished release. Its 4 versus 4 fighting structure, Marvel license. An arc system works development separated from Concord's crowded shooter position. Judgment should wait until Sony reveals the full business model, players test the game, and long-term support becomes understandable. Maybe TCon succeeds, perhaps it struggles, but declaring it dead now would replace analysis with the empty theater this commentary rejects. So, Sony's decision remains financially understandable, while its execution has often been reckless. Additional multiplayer games are not the real problem. Approving giant projects before proving demand is the problem. After Concord, Bungie, Destiny and Bluepoint, would you trust Sony when it promises its next online game is built to last? Ultimately, PlayStation learned that live service development is difficult, expensive, risky and capable of damaging entire studios. Somehow, management still has not learned that a profitable business model cannot replace a good game. Wanting another Helldivers 2 is not Sony's actual mistake. Instead, the mistake is believing that success can be manufactured by ordering 12 studios to build recurring revenue machines. Customers do not stay because a game contains seasons, currencies, roadmaps, engagement targets, or executive confidence. They stay because the game earns their time, attention, trust, and loyalty. This platform does not need 12 games designed to live forever while studios die trying to support the fantasy. Finally, it needs one game people refuse to leave and management willing to protect the team that made it.